approaching Shifnal.
In today's video we're going to be taking a look at West Midlands Railway new Class 196 that entered service on Monday. I know I'm a little bit late to the party, but I couldn't resist heading down to Shrewsbury to have a ride in one of the units myself and see what they're actually like. I think it'll be an interesting exercise because they're a little bit similar, well they are very similar to the Class 197s that will be introduced on Transport for Wales rail services, hopefully within the coming months. I know these units differ slightly in they're a little bit longer and have slightly more powerful engines, but from the videos I've seen from Sim on Trains and Gen on the Move, they seem to quite like the units, whereas I wasn't so keen on the Class 195, so it's just going to be interesting to see what the ride of the Class 196 is going to be like, because it really will be an indicator of what the Class 197s will be like, which are going to be introduced on long distance routes. So yeah, be interesting to see. This video has evolved somewhat from the initial look at the Class 196 that I had planned. Having ridden on a Class 196 to New Street and a Class 170 back to Shrewsbury, I thought it would be interesting to see if it's possible to compare the two units. But before we dive into any comparison, here are a few basic stats for the Class 196. The units built by CAF are based on the same Civity platform as a Class 195 operated by Northern, the Class 197 that are due to enter service on Wales and Borders routes this year, and the Class 331 also operated by Northern, which is an electric variant. West Midlands Trains has ordered 12 2-car units and 14 4-car units to operate on services from Birmingham New Street to Hereford and to Shrewsbury via Telford. There is also talk of them being used on east-west rail services between Oxford and Milton Keynes from 2025 using 6 2-car trains. Given that more 196s were ordered than there are Class 170s, then it isn't envisaged that any additional units will need to be ordered to operate on east-west rail services, at least not until services begin to operate from Oxford to Bletchley, which will be a little bit later on. The 100 mph capable units are powered by a 13-litre 6-cylinder MTU engine located underneath each carriage, providing about 1046 horsepower for a 2-car unit and 2092 horsepower for a 4-car train. Each 2-car unit has 141 seats, whilst a 4-car set has 311 seats. The Class 170 on the other hand has 126 seats per 2-car unit and 187 seats for 3-car sets, so already the Class 196 is ahead on seat count per carriage. However, the number of seats isn't the only aspect to take into account when thinking about customer experience, with comfort being one of the more important things to take into account. During a ride on one of Northern's Class 195s, I was less than impressed with the ride quality, which seemed a bit firm and the unit seemed to ride really badly over points, but I'm happy to report that although the ride seems a little bit firm on the Class 196, it wasn't rattly or jerky at all when travelling over points, and on the run up from Shrewsbury to Birmingham, I can honestly say I had no complaints.
Welcome aboard this service to Birmingham New Street. We will be calling at Wellington, Telford Central, Shifnal, Codsall, Wolverhampton and Birmingham New Street.
As for the seats, they did seem a little bit firm in my opinion, but for the routes on which the units will operate, which in the case of Shrewsbury to Birmingham currently takes about 1 hour 15 minutes, they did seem comfortable enough, and the seats certainly weren't like ironing boards like some modern units I could mention. I think the ride on the Class 170 felt a little bit better if I'm perfectly honest, but there isn't much in it. However, the Class 196 was possibly a little bit quieter, with the carriages on the 170 vibrating quite a bit when the units were under acceleration. The seats on the Class 197 on first inspection looked great, they really were quite substantial seats, but unfortunately they are now very tired, with the padding starting to sag, and although soft, I found after a while I just couldn't get comfortable on them. Perhaps a full refresh of the Class 170s would help a little bit, especially with the front padding of the seats collapsing, but even then I don't think the seats would offer a great deal more comfort than those fitted to the Class 196. As for amenities, the Class 196 has Wi-Fi, charging points with both sockets and USB ports, and the 4-car unit I was on had a fully accessible toilet and an additional non-PRM compliant toilet. I'm not sure what the toilet complement is on the 2-car units, but of course they will have an accessible toilet as a minimum. There didn't appear to be any luggage space on the Class 196s that I could see, and I did see someone struggling to put some large cases in the overhead racks, which are really only designed for small bags, whereas the Class 170 did have some storage space for luggage. However, I'm not really sure how important luggage space is on the routes on which they'll work, but it was one observation in favour of the Class 170. Another thing lacking from the 196s that others have noted is the lack of armrests versus the huge armrests on the Class 170s, but again it's not something I really missed on the trip from Shrewsbury to Birmingham. Both the 170s and 196s have about the same number of table seats, and both seem to have the same narrow style of table, which Simon Trains noted would only leave enough space for a single laptop to be used, but again I don't think this is a big issue on a journey of just over an hour. The 170 I was on did have Wi-Fi, although that wasn't great, and there was a distinct lack of charging facilities, but again I think this is something that could probably be remedied during a refresh. Despite the 170s being over 20 years old, I think a fair comparison can be drawn between the outgoing units and the brand new ones, and whilst the more modern Class 196 came out on top in my opinion, I wouldn't say it was a hands down victory. After all, the Class 170s at the time of their introduction were amongst the first properly modern DMUs, and the units do ride reasonably well. However, inside they are looking a little bit tired and could do with a full refresh. Having said that, even if they were refreshed and fitted with charging facilities, I really can't say they'd be any better than the 196s. The Civity units do seem to have their detractors, but in all honesty I think the new units are more than adequate for the services on which they'll operate. The trip on the Class 196 has also eased any fears I had about the Class 197s that are being introduced by Transport for Wales. Those units will operate on routes of up to and over 4 hours, but thankfully it does seem that the seats on the 197s have more padding than those fitted to the Class 196s. Having said that, the seats on the Class 196, even with the firmer padding, are fine for journeys of just over an hour, or in the case of many passengers heading to Birmingham, much less than an hour. So in summary, I think the 196s are an improvement over the 170s, which even if refreshed would be no better than the new units, and the Class 196 would still be an upgrade over the outgoing ones. So I hope you found this video informative. If you have, please do hit that like button, drop a comment in the comment section below and consider subscribing, but I'm going to leave it there for today. Say until next time, bye bye.